The desert had no mercy. The sun blazed overhead like a great burning eye, unblinking, relentless. The sand beneath her palms seared her skin as if the earth itself wanted to devour her. She staggered forward, her lips cracked, her throat dry as bone. Each breath rasped through her chest, a cruel reminder that air was the only thing the desert gave freely. Her dress was torn from the ambush, dust clinging to the once white fabric. Hours ago, though it felt like days, her caravan had been attacked. Bandits came swiftly, men with eyes like wolves and blades that glinted with greed. They had taken what they wanted, the supplies, the horses, even her dignity. And when her screams became too much for them, they had left her, tossing her into the desert as one discards useless baggage. Now the horizon shimmered with false promises. Pools of water danced in the distance, only to vanish when she stumbled toward them. The vultures circled higher, patient shadows against the burning sky. She thought bitterly of how her life had come to this. Betrayed by those she trusted, punished by the very land she once believed would offer her a new beginning. Her knees gave way. She collapsed, the sand biting into her skin. Her vision blurred, her body trembling with weakness. She thought of water, of shade, of cool rivers running between canyon walls. But most of all, she thought of him, the Apache warrior. His name rose in her heart like a prayer she dared not speak aloud. She remembered his dark, piercing eyes, his quiet strength, and the way he had once held her hand as though she was his entire world. She had loved him once, loved him fiercely, in secret, in stolen hours beneath the moon. But she had also left him, drawn away by promises of safety, of wealth, of a life that would not force her to straddle two worlds. She had walked away from him, and in doing so, shattered more than just his heart. A tear traced the dust on her cheek, hot and useless. What right had she to think of him now? What good would his memory do when death loomed as close as the vultures above? Still, her heart whispered his name like a final confession. Her eyelids grew heavy. She let herself sink against the sand, her body curling as if to shield itself from the sun's rage. Perhaps this was fitting. Alone, forgotten, consumed by the desert. She would close her eyes and let the earth take her. But then, a shadow fell across her. At first she thought it was another vulture, come to finish what the others had begun. But the shadow was tall, steady, blocking the sun's cruel glare. A voice, deep and steady, cut through the haze of her fading thoughts. Little Dove. Her heart lurched. The name. No one had called her that in years. She forced her eyes open, blinking against the light. And there he was, exactly as she remembered, yet changed. His hair, once bound, now fell loose against his shoulders. His face was leaner, hardened by years and battles she could not imagine. His eyes, those same fierce eyes, looked down at her, filled with something she could not name. Anger, pain, or something softer, buried beneath the years of silence. She tried to speak, but only a croak escaped her cracked lips. He knelt beside her, his shadow sheltering her from the burning sun. From his side he drew a water skin, pressing it gently against her mouth. The taste of cool water burst across her tongue, so sweet it made her choke. She drank greedily, clutching at his hand, the warmth of his touch as startling as the water itself. When she finally pulled away, her chest heaving, she managed one word, one plea that carried years of regret. You. His jaw tightened, his eyes unreadable. He looked at her, as a man might look upon a ghost. I should leave you, he said quietly. After what you did. After what you chose. Her heart cracked. The desert had not yet killed her, but his words nearly did. Yet still, he stayed. The water still lingered on her tongue, sweet as salvation, but his words struck harder than the desert sun. I should leave you. She flinched, not from his tone, but from the truth she could not deny. She had left him first. Years. Ago, when fear outweighed love, when promises of comfort and protection from another world tempted her away. She had told herself it was the right choice, safety over uncertainty, security over struggle. But as she looked up at him now, every excuse crumbled like dust in the wind. Her voice cracked, brittle as the desert air. "Then why didn't you?" His gaze was sharp, unreadable. He poured another trickle of water into her mouth but said, "Nothing." His hands, calloused and steady, betrayed none of the storm within him. Yet she could feel it, the clash between anger and compassion, the bitterness of betrayal against the bond that time had not erased. He finally spoke, his tone low, measured. "Because I am not like them. I do not leave people to die." The words cut her deeper than a blade. Them, the men who had betrayed her, cast her into the desert as if she were nothing. He had seen too much of such cruelty, and though she had hurt him, he could not bring himself to be like them. She tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her body. He caught her before she could fall, his arm strong around her shoulders. The nearness of him stole her breath, not just from weakness, but from the memories rushing back. Nights when his arms were her shelter, mornings when his eyes met hers with silent devotion. "I thought." Her throat tightened. She forced the words out. "I thought I was choosing a better life, but it was a lie, all of it." His jaw clenched. "You chose them over me. That was no lie." Her eyes filled, though no tears could fall. Her body was too dry for them. "I know, and I regret it every day." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy as the desert itself. Only the wind whispered across the sand, carrying the distant cries of vultures. He stood abruptly, his figure tall against the blazing horizon. "You are weak. You cannot walk far in this heat. I will take you to shade. After that, your fate is yours." She reached out instinctively, her hand trembling. "Please, don't leave me again." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, memory, perhaps longing, but he turned away. "I did not leave you. You left me." Her chest ached worse than her parched throat. She wanted to tell him everything, how she had thought of him every night, how the life she chose turned to chains, how betrayal by those she trusted had brought her here. But the desert demanded silence. Every word cost precious breath. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, strong, grounding her against the chaos of her own regret. She rested her head against him, too weak to resist, too broken to care. They moved across the sand, his steps purposeful, sure. He knew the desert as no other. Man could, where to find shade, how to read the winds, when to stop and when to push forward. She had once admired that strength, had felt safe because of it. Now, clinging to him, she realized she still did. As the heat bore down, she drifted, in and out of consciousness. Once, she awoke to see him watching her with an expression she could not name. Anger still, yes, but also something softer, unspoken. By the time he carried her into the shadow of a canyon wall, laying her gently on the cool stone, she could no longer hold back her words. "You saved me," she whispered. Even after all I did." He did not answer. Instead, he crouched by her side, tending to her wounds with water and herbs from a leather pouch. His silence spoke louder than any words, but as she closed her eyes, clinging to life and to him, she felt it, beneath the anger, beneath the scars. Love had not died. It had only been buried, waiting, like water beneath the desert sand. The canyon walls rose high above her, jagged and red against the pale sky, their shade a mercy she had thought she'd never feel again. The stone radiated warmth, but shielded her from the sun's cruel gaze. She lay on a flat surface, her body finally cooling, though her throat still ached and her limbs trembled with weakness. The Apache warrior knelt beside her, silent as always. His movements were deliberate, careful, spreading a poultice across a scrape on her arm, tying cloth around her wrist. Each touch was steady, yet distant, as though he worked on a stranger. She watched him, fighting the haze of exhaustion. Every line of his face was sharper than she remembered, carved by years of hardship. The boy she had once loved was gone. In his place stood a man shaped by loss and fire. At last, she found her voice. "You haven't asked me why I'm here, why they left me." He didn't look up. "It is not my concern." Her chest tightened. "It should be. You saved me." Finally, his dark eyes met hers. They burned with intensity, though not with warmth. "I saved a life. Nothing more." The words stung, but she forced herself not to look away. "I was betrayed. By the same people I chose over you. They used me, discarded me. You were right. All those years ago. I was blind." He turned back to his work, grinding dried leaves with a stone. "You speak of regret, as if it changes the past." "It doesn't," she admitted softly. "But it's all I have left." Silence settled between them again, broken only by the crackle of wind through the canyon. She closed her eyes, letting memory overtake her. She saw him as he once was, standing tall in the moonlight, his hand outstretched, offering her a future filled with uncertainty, but also love. She remembered turning away, tears in her eyes, because she was afraid. Afraid of the hardship, afraid of being cast out by her own people. And she remembered the way he looked at her when she walked away. The kind of look that seared itself into her soul. When she opened her eyes again, he was still there, still silent, still tending to her wounds. But his hands trembled faintly now, betraying the storm he tried to conceal. "You hate me," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "I hate what you did." "Then why do this?" He paused, his hand hovering above her bandaged arm. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, "Because once I loved you more than life itself." Some things do not die, even when they should. Her breath caught. She had not expected such honesty, not after years of silence and pain. The confession struck her harder than any accusation could. She reached for his hand weakly, hesitantly. This time he didn't pull away. His rough fingers closed around hers, steadying her, grounding her. She clung to that touch as though it were the only real thing in a world of shifting sand. For a while, neither spoke. The canyon cradled them. In silence, the weight of years pressing down heavier than the desert sun. At last, she murmured, "If you had left me there, I would have welcomed death. But you didn't. You gave me another chance." Her eyes searched his face. "What will you do with me now?" He pulled his hand away, standing tall, his figure a shadow against the canyon light. "That depends on you. On whether you walk forward as the woman who betrayed me, or as someone worth saving." Her heart pounded, her breath shallow. She knew what he meant. It wasn't just survival he was speaking of, but redemption. He was giving her a chance not only to live, but to prove herself worthy of the love she had thrown away. And she swore, as she looked up at him, that she would not waste it. The canyon's silence was not eternal. It broke suddenly, shattered by the faint echo of hooves. The sound carried through the stone walls, distant yet sharp, each beat of the horse's steps rattling through the ground beneath them. The Apache warrior stiffened, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his waist. She tried to sit up, alarm sparking in her chest. "What is it?" His eyes narrowed, scanning the rim of the canyon. Riders. Her blood turned cold. Them. The men who had abandoned her were not content to leave her to the vultures, it seemed. Perhaps they feared she had survived. Perhaps they were greedy for the last trinkets she still carried. Whatever their reason, she knew one thing. If they found her here, they would finish what they started. The warrior crouched low, moving like a shadow across the stone. His every movement was precise, deliberate, his body attuned to danger in a way hers could never be. He peered up toward the rim, eyes narrowing. 3 riders appeared against the sun, their silhouettes stark against the bright sky. She recognized them instantly. The leader, broad-shouldered with a scar running across his cheek. Another, thin as a whip, his hat tilted low. And the third, the one who had laughed the loudest when they dragged her into the desert, his grin. Still vivid in her nightmares, her body trembled. She felt the canyon shrink around her, trapping her between stone and memory. The warrior returned to her side, crouching low. You cannot move far. Stay here. Do not make a sound. Fear clawed at her throat. They'll kill you. His gaze held hers, steady and unyielding. They will try. Before she could protest, he was gone, melting into the shadows of the canyon like smoke. She clutched at her chest, heart racing, torn between terror and awe. Even after all these years, he moved with the grace of a predator, silent and unseen. The riders descended into the canyon, their voices carrying. "Spread out!" the scarred leader barked. She couldn't have crawled far. Her breath caught. They were hunting her, the way wolves circle a wounded deer. The thin one dismounted, scanning the rocks. "Tracks here," he muttered. Small, fresh. She pressed herself against the stone, every muscle screaming for stillness. The canyon felt too open, too exposed. At any moment, their eyes could fall on her. And then, like a shadow striking from nowhere, the warrior was upon them. He dropped from a ledge above, landing with the force of a storm. His blade flashed, swift and merciless, cutting the thin. One down before a cry could escape his lips. The others spun, weapons drawn, curses flying. Chaos erupted. The scarred leader fired his revolver, the shot cracking against the stone. The warrior moved fast, ducking behind cover, his body a blur. He hurled a rock, striking the grinning outlaw in the temple, sending him sprawling. The scarred leader roared, charging forward, but the warrior met him head-on. They clashed like titans, fists and blades colliding, the sound echoing through the canyon walls. From her hiding place, she watched with wide eyes, torn between dread and desperate hope. Every strike, every dodge, every blow carried the weight of years, his rage, his strength, his refusal to let cruelty reign. At last, the warrior's knife found its mark. The scarred leader fell, clutching his chest, his roar cut short. Dust rose around him, settling in silence. The canyon was still again. The warrior stood in the center, chest heaving, blade dripping red. The vultures circled above, their cries shrill against the empty sky. Slowly, he turned back to her. His eyes, dark and burning, met hers. There was no triumph in them, only the heavy knowledge of survival. She crawled toward him, her body weak, but her voice steady. "You saved me." Again. His expression was unreadable, but his words cut through the silence. "No, I saved us both. The desert does not forgive weakness." And though his tone was cold, she heard something beneath it, a promise, unspoken yet undeniable. As long as he lived, he would not let her fall. The sun dipped low, painting the canyon walls in crimson fire. The heat eased, but with its retreat came another danger, the desert's cold night. Shadows stretched long across the sand, and the cries of coyotes echoed in the distance. The warrior dragged the last outlaw's body into a shallow grave he had carved with his knife and bare hands. She watched him from where she sat propped against a boulder, her strength still thin but her eyes sharp, following every movement. He worked without complaint, every motion precise, his muscles taut with purpose. When at last the earth covered the final traces of the men, he rose, wiping the sweat and dust from his brow. He didn't look at her as he sat nearby, tending to the fire he had built from dry brush and broken branches. The flames cracked and hissed, throwing light across his face. It was the first time she had truly seen him since he pulled her from the desert floor. The lines etched into his brow, the shadows carved around his mouth. He had aged, yes, but more than that. He had endured. She found her voice soft, but steady. You buried them. His eyes stayed fixed on the fire. The desert does not need more carrion. A silence followed, filled only by the pop of burning wood. She drew her arms around herself, shivering as the chill set in. He noticed, though he said nothing, only tossing another branch onto the flames. At last, she whispered, I never stopped thinking of you. His head turned, his eyes dark and piercing. Words mean little now. They mean everything, she pressed, her voice cracking. I left you. I chose a life I thought would keep me safe, but it was hollow. Every night, I wondered if I had made the greatest mistake of my life, and when they cast me into the desert, I thought of you, only you. If I had died there, my last breath would have been your name. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the storm in his expression. He didn't speak at once, as though weighing whether her words were truth or desperation. When he finally answered, his tone was low, heavy. And what of me? Do you think I did not bleed when you left? Do you think I did not wake each morning with your ghost beside me? His voice rose, raw with anger and pain. You chose them. You left me to walk this land with nothing but ashes. Her eyes stung, but this time tears came, hot and unstoppable. I was a coward. I thought I needed what they offered, comfort, safety, but it was all lies. You were the only truth I ever had. He looked away, his jaw set, his shoulders rigid, yet his hands betrayed him, clenched tight, trembling faintly. The fire crackled between them, a fragile bridge across years of silence. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to beg for forgiveness, not with words, but with the closeness they once shared. But she feared the distance was too great, the wound too deep. He rose suddenly, pacing the canyon floor, his silhouette tall against the moonlight that now spilled across the rim. Finally, he stopped, turning back toward her. I cannot forget, he said, his voice like gravel. But I cannot hate you either. Not when I look at you. Her breath caught. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A crack in the wall he had built around his heart. He came back to the fire, lowering himself to sit across from her. For the first time since the desert, his gaze softened, the fury in his eyes dimming into something else, something older, deeper. Rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow we move. The desert is not finished testing us. She nodded, though her heart still pounded. As she lay down beside the fire, its warmth lulling her into fragile sleep, she knew one thing. This night had not mended them, but it had begun. The desert had spared her life, but it was the man across the fire who held her fate and her heart in his hands. Dawn came quietly, the first light spilling over the canyon walls in pale gold. She stirred awake, stiff from the stone ground, the fire now little more than smoldering ash. The Apache warrior was already awake, crouched near the canyon's edge, scanning the horizon like a hawk. He turned as she sat up, his gaze sharp. We move. The sun will not wait for us. Her legs trembled when she tried to stand. He caught her before she fell, his arms strong and steady around her waist. For a moment she leaned into him, the warmth of his body grounding her. Then he stepped back, his face unreadable, as though afraid to linger too close. They set out across the sand. The desert stretched endlessly before them, rolling dunes, dry riverbeds, and scattered scrub. Each step felt heavier than the last. She carried little strength, and every breath seemed to scrape her lungs raw. Still, he kept her moving, his pace slowed but unwavering. By midday, the sun was merciless again. Heat shimmered off the ground, the air thick and burning. Her lips cracked, her tongue swollen with thirst. He offered her the water skin sparingly, measuring each drop as though it were gold. "Drink," he told her, tipping it gently to her mouth. "But not too much. There is little left." She swallowed, the coolness flooding her throat, but the relief was fleeting. Handing it back, she whispered, "How do you do it? How do you survive this land when it wants us dead?" He looked at her, his expression grave. "The desert is not cruel. It is honest. It gives nothing freely. It teaches who deserves to live." She faltered at his words. "And do I? After all I've done?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the pack on his shoulder and continued forward. She followed, her heart heavy, unsure if his silence meant condemnation or a chance yet to prove herself. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, unrelenting. Her legs buckled, and she stumbled into the sand. He was at her side in an instant, kneeling, his hand firm on her back. "You cannot stop here," he said, his tone stern but not unkind. "The sun will burn you alive." Tears pricked her eyes, part pain, part despair. "I'm slowing you. Down! Leave me!" His eyes burned, fierce and unyielding. "No!" The word struck her harder than the sun. He pulled her to her feet, half carrying her across the sand until they reached the shade of a lone boulder. There, he lowered her gently, his chest heaving with exertion. She looked at him, searching his face. "Why? Why keep me alive when I gave you nothing but pain?" For a long moment, he said nothing. His gaze turned toward the horizon, distant and brooding. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Because once, you mattered more than my own blood. Because even now, I cannot let you die where the earth would swallow your bones." Her breath caught, the raw truth of his words settling deep inside her. She reached for his hand, trembling. This time, he didn't pull away. His fingers closed around hers, rough but steady, a touch that carried both anger and something softer he couldn't quite name. For the first time since their reunion, silence between them was not heavy with regret, but with possibility. As the sun dipped toward afternoon, he rose, pulling her gently to her feet. "We keep moving. If we can reach the river by nightfall, you will live." She nodded, clinging to his hand longer than she should have, unwilling to let go. The desert had stripped her bare, of pride, of excuses, of lies. All that remained was the truth beating in her chest. She had lost him once, but if the earth spared her now, she would not let it happen again. The desert stretched on, cruel and endless, but as dusk neared, the air shifted. A breeze carried with it a faint promise, cooler, gentler, tinged with the scent of water. The Apache warrior lifted his head, nostrils flaring, eyes sharpening. "We are close," he said simply. The woman's heart leapt, though her body was nearly spent. Every step felt like wading through fire, yet hope lent her strength. She clung to his arm when she faltered, and though he said nothing, he did not pull away. At last, they reached it. A narrow river cutting through the sand, its waters glimmering silver in the dying light. Trees bent low along its banks, their roots drinking deeply. The sound of rushing water filled the canyon hollow, a song of life where death had reigned. She fell to her knees at the bank, scooping water into her hands. It spilled through her fingers as she drank, gasping, tears mixing with the river's gift. He crouched beside her, watching closely, then gently pulled her hand back. "Slowly," he cautioned. "Too much, and it will sicken you." His voice, though stern, held a softness she hadn't heard in years. She obeyed, sipping carefully, savoring every drop as though it were the sweetest wine. When her thirst eased, she splashed water across her face, washing away dust and blood. For the first time since the ambush, she felt human again. She looked at him, bathed in twilight, and something inside her ached. "You saved me," she murmured. "The desert would have taken me, but you—" He cut her off with a shake of his head. "It was not me. The river was here long before either of us. I only knew the way." But she saw through his words. He had carried her when she could not stand, given her water when he had little to spare, fought off the wolves that hunted her. The river may have been there, but it was him who led her to it. As night settled, he built another fire, this one brighter, its flames dancing on the river's edge. The sound of flowing water mixed with the crackle of burning wood, lulling her into a strange calm. She sat across from him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I don't deserve your kindness, not after what I did." His gaze met hers, steady, unflinching. "No, you don't." The bluntness stung, but he continued, his voice quieter now. "Yet here you are, and here I am. Perhaps the desert meant for this." Her breath caught. "You think fate brought us back together?" He looked into the flames, silent for a long time. At last he said, "I think the desert kills the weak, but it also tests the strong. Perhaps this is our test." She let the words sink in, heavy but hopeful. A test. That meant a chance, if not to erase the past, then at least to prove herself, worthy of something new. When the fire burned low, they lay near it, the river whispering in the background. She shivered in the night air, and without a word, he draped his blanket across her shoulders. The warmth of it, and the faint scent of him woven into the fabric, wrapped around her like a memory reborn. She turned her head, meeting his eyes, across the glow of embers. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. The weight of years hung between them, but so did something else. Something fragile, flickering, refusing to die. Her lips parted, her voice barely above a whisper. "If this is a test, then I will not fail it." He said nothing, but his eyes softened, and for the first time since she'd fallen into the sand to die, she thought she saw it. Hope, quiet and unspoken, reflected in his gaze. The night was still. The fire burned low, and the river whispered like a lullaby. For the first time in days, she drifted into a deeper sleep, her body finding rest at last. But the Apache warrior did not sleep. He sat upright, back against a rock, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the firelight. The desert had taught him long ago. Danger came when a man let his guard fall, and danger came now. He heard it before he saw it. The faint crunch of boots on sand, the subtle shift of brush disturbed by movement. His hand slid to the knife at Tao. His side, his body tense as a bowstring. The firelight flickered, throwing shifting shapes across the canyon wall, but he knew the truth. They were not alone. A twig snapped. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. Before she could speak, his hand pressed gently over her mouth. "Quiet," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Her pulse raced, but she nodded, trusting him. From the shadows emerged men. 5 of them, soldiers, judging by their coats, though not the kind who wore honor in their eyes. Their rifles gleamed faintly in the moonlight. The leader, tall and broad, stepped closer, his face twisted with arrogance. "Well, what do we have here?" his voice carried, low and mocking. A squaw and some half-breed savage playing house by the river. The warrior rose slowly, placing himself between her and the intruders. His stance was calm, but his eyes burned. "Keep moving," he said, his voice steady as stone. The soldiers laughed. One spat into the fire, making the embers hiss. "This river's ours tonight. You want a drink, you pay." And the woman, his gaze slid toward her, predatory. "She'll do." Her blood ran cold. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. But the warrior's hand tightened around, his knife. His body coiled like a predator ready to strike. "Touch her," he said softly, "and none of you will see the sunrise." The soldiers jeered, circling closer. The leader sneered. Bold words from a man alone. But he was not alone. Summoning what strength she had, she forced herself to stand, stepping beside him. Her legs shook, but her voice held firm. "If you come closer, you'll have to go through me too." The soldiers laughed again, but the warrior's eyes flickered with something unexpected, pride. She was weak, fragile from the desert's trial, yet she stood with him. After all the years, all the betrayal, she had chosen his side. The leader spat into the sand. "Kill the savage, leave the girl." The order hung in the air for only a breath before the canyon erupted into violence. The warrior moved like lightning, striking first. His knife flashed, finding the throat of the closest soldier. The man fell before his rifle could fire. Another lunged, but the warrior twisted, seizing the weapon and using it to strike the man down. She scrambled for a fallen branch, swinging it with all her might at a soldier who lunged toward her. It cracked against his arm, buying her precious seconds before the warrior cut him down. Gunfire split the night, the sound booming through the canyon. She ducked, the shot whistling past her ear. Smoke filled the air, mingling with the fire's glow. The warrior fought with ferocity, each movement precise, born of years surviving both men and desert. But the soldiers pressed hard, and for a moment, she feared even he could not withstand them all. Then, with a roar, he drove the last soldier back, slamming him against the canyon wall. The knife struck true, and silence fell as the body crumpled into the sand. Breathless, she clutched her chest, staring at the carnage. 5 men lay scattered, the firelight flickering across their still forms. The warrior wiped his blade clean, his chest rising and falling with exertion. His eyes met hers, dark and burning. "Now you see," he said, voice low. "The world you chose is the world that leaves you for dead or takes you by force." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not only from fear. She saw it now, clearer than ever. The life she had chosen had betrayed her, but the man before her, scarred and fierce, had never stopped fighting for her, even when she did not deserve it. She stepped toward him, her hand trembling as it touched his arm. "I see," she whispered, "and I will never choose them again." For a heartbeat, his body stiffened beneath her touch. Then, slowly, his hand covered hers, rough and warm. The night was theirs, the river whispering its mercy as the fire burned. Low, and for the first time, the desert did not feel like death. It felt like the beginning of something reborn. The fire crackled low, its glow casting long, twisted shadows over the canyon floor where 5 soldiers lay still. The scent of gunpowder lingered in the air, sharp and bitter, mixing with the copper tang of blood. She wrapped the blanket tighter, around her shoulders, trembling, not from the chill of night, but from what she had just seen. Death had come so close, yet she was alive because of him. The Apache warrior crouched near the river, washing his blade clean. His movements were deliberate, controlled, as if each stroke across the water's surface was a ritual. He did not look at her. Her voice broke, the silence, soft but urgent. "How many times have you had to do this? Kill to survive?" His hand stilled. The river ran red for a moment before carrying the blood away. Slowly, he rose and faced her, his eyes shadowed. Too many times to count, and every time it takes something from me. She swallowed hard, her guilt rising like bile. I thought leaving you would save me from that world. I thought a different life, a husband, a home, would give me peace. Her eyes burned as tears welled, but all it gave me was chains. Chains and betrayal. The warrior's jaw clenched, his gaze unrelenting. And in leaving, you chained me too. I searched for you in every wind, every shadow on the canyon. Wall. You chose them over me. The words cut deep, but she did not look away. For too long, she had hidden from the truth. Tonight, with blood on the ground and stars above, hiding was no longer possible. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid of loving you more than I loved myself. Afraid of a life in the desert, of hunger, of hardship. But I see now. I was blind. The hardship was there all along. Only without you, I had no strength to endure it. His breath hitched, the first crack in his stone-like resolve. He stepped closer, the firelight painting his face in shades of pain and longing. You speak now of love, he said lowly. But love is not words. Love is standing when the desert tries to bury you. Love is water carried mile after mile for someone who cannot walk. Love is... His voice broke for a moment, rough and raw. Love is what I gave you. And still, you left. Her tears fell freely, hot against her cheeks. She reached for his hand, hesitating as though touching him would burn. But then she placed her trembling fingers against his calloused palm. I left once, she said, her voice shaking but sure. But I will not leave again, not even if the desert swallows us whole, not even if death comes tomorrow. The canyon was silent except for the river, flowing steady and endless, as if it bore witness to their reckoning. He stared at her, searching, her face, her eyes, her trembling lips, searching for the lie he expected to find. But there was none. At last, he closed his fingers around hers, rough and strong. It was not forgiveness yet, but it was not rejection either. It was something in between, fragile, trembling, alive. Words are wind, he murmured. But if you mean them, then prove them. She nodded, her tears drying under the weight of his gaze. I will. The night stretched on. Together, they buried the soldiers in shallow graves, marking each with a stone. It was grim work, but it needed to be done. And with every shovelful of sand, with every stone set into place, she felt a strange release, as though, with each body laid to rest, a piece of the past was being buried too. When it was finished, they sat together by the dying fire. She leaned against him, exhaustion heavy, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. His arm wrapped around her, hesitant at first, then firm. And beneath the stars, with the river singing its eternal song, she realized that for the first time since she left him, she was home. Morning broke slowly over the desert, painting the horizon in hues of rose and gold. The river shimmered in the early light, its surface smooth and endless, a mirror of the sky above. The storm of the night before had passed, leaving only quiet. She stirred awake beside the fire's ashes, the blanket wrapped snugly around her shoulders. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she dreamed, that he was only a phantom from her memories, watching over her like he once had. But when she turned, he was there, sitting cross-legged at the river's edge, sharpening his knife. Real, solid, unyielding. Her heart swelled with both longing and fear. They had spoken truths in the night, stripped bare by blood and fire, but now daylight demanded more. Words alone would not be enough. She rose, stepping to him. The sand was cool beneath her feet, the air crisp with dawn. You didn't sleep, she said softly. He glanced at her, then back to the blade. The desert doesn't allow it, not when enemies walk it. She knelt beside him, her eyes fixed on his hands. Strong hands, hands that had carried her, fought for her, buried the dead. Her voice trembled as she asked the question that had haunted her since they met again. Can you ever forgive me? The sound of stone against steel stopped. His hand stilled. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to hers. His dark eyes, usually hard as obsidian, seemed to soften, though the pain within them had not vanished. Forgiveness, he said quietly, is not given. It is earned. You left me once. The wound you made does not close in a night. Her throat tightened. She bowed her head. Then let me earn it. Every day for as long as I live. If the desert takes us tomorrow, at least let me spend. Today, proving I will not leave again, silence fell. The river flowed steady. The desert wind brushed past them. And for a long moment he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out, tilting her chin up so her eyes met his. Do you still love me? He asked, voice low, raw, stripped of all defenses. Her answer came without hesitation. I never stopped. Something inside him broke then, not with violence, but with release. The years of anger, the bitterness, the endless ache of betrayal seemed to bleed out with her words. He studied her face, seeing not just the woman who had left, but the woman who had endured, who had fought beside him, who now stood willing to walk the desert's endless miles with him. He leaned closer, his forehead pressing gently against hers. His breath was warm, steady. Then stay, he whispered. Her tears came again, but this time they were not of sorrow. She closed the distance, her lips brushing his, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. The kiss was not of youthful passion, but of something deeper, something born of suffering and survival. It was a promise renewed. When they parted, she rested against him, her head on his shoulder, her hand over his heart. I will stay, she vowed. Not because I fear the desert, but because with you I no longer do. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. The knife lay forgotten at his side, the fire ashes cold, but in that moment, the warmth between them was enough. As the sun climbed higher, the desert did not seem so cruel. The endless sands shimmered like gold, the river sang its eternal song, and the wind carried with it not death, but promise. Together, they rose and began walking, side by side, their shadows long on the sand. Whatever lay ahead, hardship, danger, hunger, they would face it not as two broken souls, but as one. Danna. Desert had tested them, the river had spared them, and love, fragile yet fierce, had bound them once more.